I've been driving logging roads in the Pacific Northwest for 11 years. I work for a timber survey company out of Centralia, and most of what I do is drive. I drive to plots that other people have flagged on satellite imagery. I confirm what's there, I mark it, I file my report, and I drive back. It's not complicated. The roads are. But after 11 years, you develop a sense for them. You learn how to read a logging road, the way the gravel changes color when a spur hasn't been maintained, the way vegetation starts creeping in from the shoulders when nobody's been through in a season. You learn to feel it in the steering. I say that because I need you to understand that what happened to me in October wasn't the result of someone who didn't know what they were doing out there. I knew exactly what I was doing. That's what I keep coming back to. It was October 14th. I'd been assigned a survey area about 40 miles east of Randle, up past a stretch of DNR land that borders some older private timber holdings. The access was through a network of roads that branch off Forest Road 23. Real roads at first, gravel and graded, and then they start to degrade. Narrow. No signage, no cell reception after the first 15 minutes. That part is normal. I had my maps, I had my GPS unit, and I had a printed quad sheet from the Forest Service, which I always bring as a backup because GPS can drop out in the valleys. I wasn't concerned. I reached my first plot around 11 in the morning, did the assessment, noted the stand composition, mostly second growth dug fir, some hemlock, photographed the tags, filed it on my tablet. Then I got back in the truck and headed for the second plot, which was supposed to be about 6 miles further along the same road, bearing northeast. This is where it gets hard to explain. The road I was on, the one I'd been on all morning, forked. And I don't mean it split into 2 obvious branches. It's more like I came around a curve and realized there was a road going off to the right that I hadn't noticed on the way in, which, fine. That happens. Old skid roads, decommissioned spurs, sometimes just a track that someone cut decades ago and never recorded. I wouldn't have taken it, normally. But my GPS had been lagging for the last mile or so, and the bearing on it looked like the right fork was actually more consistent with where I needed to go. The printed map didn't show either fork clearly. The contour lines were too tight in that section, and the road detail was poor. So I made a judgment call. I took the right fork. The road quality changed almost immediately, but not in the way I expected. Usually, when you take a wrong spur, the road gets worse. This one got better. The gravel was even, well packed, no washboarding. The shoulders were clean. There was no encroachment from the brush. Someone was maintaining this road, and recently. I remember thinking that maybe I'd found a newer access road for one of the private timber companies. That happens sometimes. They'll build a road, and it won't show up on public maps for years. I kept driving. After about 4 miles, the forest started to open up. The trees pulled back from the road. There was a clearing, and then another one. And then I came over a small rise and saw rooftops. I slowed down. There were buildings. Not cabins, not hunting shacks. Buildings. Houses. I could see what looked like a 2-story structure off to the left, painted white, with a peaked roof. There was a row of smaller structures along what amounted to a street. The road I was on became that street. It just fed right into it, like the town had grown out of the road itself. There was no sign, no indication on any map I had. I stopped the truck and sat there for a minute. I should say that finding old settlements in the Cascades isn't unheard of. There are ghost towns scattered all through the logging country, places that existed for 20 or 30 years around a mill or a rail spur, and then emptied out when the work moved on. Most of them are ruins, collapsed roof lines, foundations, sometimes a chimney still standing. What I was looking at was not that. The buildings were intact. The paint on the white building wasn't peeling. There were curtains in some of the windows. I pulled forward slowly. The street was maybe 200 yards long. I counted buildings as I went. There were 9 on the left side and 7 on the right. They were all wood frame, all single or double story, all in a style that I'd describe as plain. Simple. Functional. They looked like buildings from the 1950s or 1960s. That kind of utilitarian post-war construction. But they were in remarkable condition. There were no cars, no power lines, no satellite dishes, no mailboxes. I stopped again about halfway through and got out of the truck. I left the engine running. The air was cold. I could smell wood smoke, which is something I noted at the time but didn't fully register until later. It had been cold enough for wood smoke to make sense, so my brain just filed it as normal. I stood in the street and looked around. There was no sound. Not no human sound. No sound. No birds. No wind in the trees. No creak noise. The silence was the kind you notice physically. It had texture. I remember my ears adjusting, almost straining for something, and finding nothing. I walked over to the nearest building on the right side. It was a small structure, maybe 20 by 30 feet, with a single door and 2 windows facing the street. The windows had curtains, plain white, drawn closed. There was a small concrete step at the door. The door was painted brown, and the paint was in good condition. I didn't try the handle. I don't know why I didn't. I think at that point I was still in survey mode. I was observing, cataloging, trying to figure out what I was looking at. I walked to the next building, and it was nearly identical. Same dimensions, same layout, same curtains. I looked back down the street at the other buildings and realized they were all very similar. Not identical, but close. Like they'd all been built from the same set of plans with minor variations. The white building, the larger one, was at what I'd call the far end of the street, though it was really just where the road curved and went back into the trees. It was the only 2-story building, and it was wider than the others. It had a small covered porch. I walked toward it. As I got closer, I noticed something that I've thought about a lot since then. The ground floor windows on the white building didn't have curtains. They were dark. I could see inside, partially, though the glass had a strange quality to it. Almost like it was older glass, slightly warped, the kind that distorts what you see through it. I got within about 15 feet of the nearest window and looked in. There was a room, a large room. There were rows of wooden chairs, not pews, just simple wooden chairs, arranged in neat lines, all facing the same direction. The far wall had a raised platform, like a low stage, and on the platform there was a single wooden lectern. There was nothing else. No decorations, no symbols, no books on the lectern, no wear marks on the floor. The chairs looked like they had never been sat in. The room was clean, aggressively clean, in a way that didn't feel like neglect or abandonment, but like maintenance. Someone was keeping this room ready. I stepped back from the window. I stood there in the street, and I did something I don't usually do, which is that I checked myself. I consciously asked myself whether I was uncomfortable, and I was. But it was a strange kind of discomfort. Nothing was wrong. There was no threat. There was no indication of anything dangerous. It was just a town, an unlisted, unmapped, well-maintained town with no people in it, in the middle of a logging road network 40 miles from the nearest highway. I told myself that there was probably a simple explanation. A private community, a religious group, some kind of retreat center. The chairs in the white building could have been for meetings, lectures, anything. I walked back toward my truck. I was halfway there when I looked down and noticed the road surface. The street, which I'd been driving and walking on, was hard-packed earth. Not gravel, not asphalt. Packed earth, almost like it had been tamped down deliberately. And on the surface I could see tire tracks, just one set. They were mine. I looked further down the street, past where I'd driven, and the surface was smooth, untouched. No tire marks, no footprints, no disturbance of any kind. Whatever vehicles had been used to maintain this place, they hadn't used this street to come and go, or they hadn't been here in a very long time. But the wood smoke, I could still smell it faintly, coming from somewhere. I got back in the truck. I sat there for a moment with my hands on the wheel, and then I did something that I've questioned more than anything else about that day. Instead of turning around immediately, I drove forward. I followed the road through the curve at the end of the street, past the white building, and into the trees on the other side. The road continued for about another quarter mile. The forest closed in again. And then I came to a gate. It was a metal gate, not a Forest Service gate, not a cable strung between two posts. A proper gate. Welded steel, maybe 8 feet wide, set between two concrete posts. It was closed. There was no lock on it, or at least not a visible one. There was no sign on it. Beyond the gate, the road continued, but it was different, smoother, darker, like it had been treated with something. I couldn't see far because the road curved again almost immediately past the gate. I did not get out of the truck. I sat there looking at the gate for what felt like a long time, but was probably 2 minutes. Then I put the truck in reverse and backed up. I backed all the way through the town, watching it slide past me in my side mirrors. I didn't turn around until I was past the last building. Then I drove. I drove fast, faster than I should have on a logging road. I hit the fork, took the left branch back the way I'd come, and didn't stop until I was back on Forest Road 23. I pulled over and sat there with the engine idling. My hands were steady. My breathing was normal. I wasn't panicking. I just felt like I needed to be still for a minute. I skipped the second survey plot. I drove back to Randle, got cell reception, and called my supervisor. I told him I'd found an unlisted settlement and asked if he knew anything about private holdings in that area. He said he'd check. He called me back an hour later and said the parcel records for that section were all DNR and Forest Service. No private holdings, no easements, no special use permits. He asked me if I was sure about the location. I told him I was. He said he'd flag it and someone would follow up. I went back to my motel room and pulled up every map I could find. USGS quads, Forest Service motor vehicle use maps, County GIS data, Google Earth. Nothing. The fork in the road didn't appear on any of them. The road I'd taken, the town, none of it showed up. On Google Earth, the area where I estimated the town should be was just unbroken canopy. Dense forest. No clearings, no rooftops, no road. I didn't sleep well that night. Not because I was afraid, exactly. Because I kept going over the details and none of them added up. The condition of the buildings, the maintained road, the wood smoke, the chairs, the gate. None of it fit the pattern of anything I'd seen in 11 years of doing this work. And the silence. I kept coming back to the silence. I've been in remote areas hundreds of times, and there is always sound. Always. Wind, birds, water, insects, something. That town had nothing. It was like the sound had been removed. My supervisor called me the next morning and told me not to worry about filing the settlement as part of my report. He said he'd talked to someone at the district office, and they said it was probably an old CCC camp or something similar that had been missed during decommissioning surveys. He told me to just finish my other plots and move on. His tone was different than usual. Not unfriendly, just clipped. Like he wanted to be done talking about it. I finished my survey work over the next 2 days. I didn't go back to that area. On my last day, I was working a plot about 12 miles south of where the town had been, and I stopped for lunch on the side of the road. While I was eating, a truck came down the road from the north. A white truck, newer model, no markings. It slowed as it passed me. The driver looked at me, just looked. Didn't wave, didn't nod, didn't stop. The truck had no plates. I watched it disappear around the bend, and then I packed up my lunch and left. When I got home, I tried to find the town again using different mapping tools. I spent hours on it. I found nothing. I called a friend who works for the county assessor's office and asked him to run the parcel data for that township and range. He did. Everything came back as public land. No structures, no permits, no history of settlement. I thought about going back. I thought about it a lot. I even planned a route once, on a Saturday, thinking I'd just drive out there on my own time and see if I could find the fork again. I got as far as Forest Road 23. I drove past the turnoff where I'd gone in that day. I slowed down and looked at the road heading into the trees, and I kept driving. I didn't stop. I just kept going until I was back on the highway. That was 5 months ago. I haven't been assigned to that area since. I requested a transfer to the South Cascades survey districts, and my supervisor approved it without asking why. I don't talk about it at work. I mentioned it once to a coworker, very casually. Just asked if he'd ever found anything weird out on the roads. He said he'd found a car once, parked in the middle of a decommissioned road with the doors open and nobody around. He said he didn't report it. I asked him why not, and he said he just didn't. The thing I keep thinking about is the chairs. The rows of clean wooden chairs in that white building, all facing the same direction, all perfectly aligned. A room set up for something that, as far as I could tell, had never happened. Or was about to happen. I don't know which possibility is worse. I check Google Earth every few weeks. The canopy over that area never changes. There's never a clearing, never a road, never a rooftop. But I know what I saw. I know what I smelled. I know what I didn't hear. I took a wrong turn on a logging road, and I found a town that isn't on any map. I don't think I was supposed to find it. And I think the reason I haven't gone back is because some part of me understands that finding it once was an accident, but finding it twice would be something else. Something I'd have to answer for. I still drive logging roads. I just don't take the right fork anymore, even when the GPS says I should, especially then.